join the challenge. More people are curious about what is a plant-rich diet. Some, as I said earlier, that different people are in different stages in their dietary journeys, and they're learning more, and we are learning as well. So today we have a very special talk by a very special speaker, and her name is Anna Bradley. I'll just take a minute to introduce her. Anna Bradley is the executive director at Sentient Media, and she is a social justice advocate and believes that meaningful content can make the future meaningful, whatever the medium. Her background is in content production and a startup consultancy in London, where she founded a digital agency pr.co.uk and worked with global clients and corporates for over a decade to help build dedicated digital communities. She transitioned to serve the nonprofit space in 2018 to work with organizations focused on building gender balance in the tech funder and founder landscapes. Today, her topic is reporting on food systems and exploration of the media, chickens, and the environment. And she, as we were conversing, uh, it is common. It is rather known fact that meat and dairy are industries which have very high environmental impact. However, when we talk about meat or any animal product, the two products which get spotlighted all the time are beef and dairy, um, and not a lot on the billions of chickens who are also bred and the kind of impact they have for their meat and eggs. So today, Anna is going to give us a talk with chicken as an example to really explain the whole process of how food systems are impacting the environment. So I'd like to welcome Anna once more, and let's just all clap if we can, and I'm gonna just invite Anna now to start speaking.
Thank you. Thank you for a lovely introduction. It's an honor to be here to speak to you all about this topic. I, as Ambri was saying, run Sentient Media, which is obviously a nonprofit media outlet. And what we do is try to present and create transparency around the food systems. I think that this is quite an interesting addition to your learning about plant-based cooking and eating and building different habits for the environment, because what you also need to understand is the way that the media represents these issues and how to read the media and how to be a part of the media to help change and build a better future for all of us. So I'm just going to share my screen. If you know, let me know if you can see that okay.
Yep, we can. I can see that. Everybody else?
Yeah.
Cool.
Great.
Okay. All right. So yes, as Ambri was saying, I came to Sentient Media by way of Piper, PYPR, where I did digital storytelling and camera work to help people and businesses build digital and online communities. And then I joined Sentient Media at the end of 2019 as a volunteer and an advisor. And I was not prepared for how much I would learn about how bound up animals are in every single aspect of our lives, from food to makeup, to clothes, to transport, and everything in between. And within a couple of months, I was utterly convinced of the importance of an organization like Sentient Media. This is an example of one of our homepage, breaking investigations, and the kind of stories that we publish. But the reason I believe that an organization like Sentient Media is so important is that the scale to which we use animals is just mind-boggling. And I'm sure you're learning a lot about this over these 2 weeks. But just thinking about food, and food, of course, as we know, is everything. It's something we, most of us sit down to 3 meals a day, sometimes more, sometimes less. But considering how much food we produce and how much we consume and its outsized impact on the earth and on our health, we don't know a whole lot about how our food systems operate. And we don't know why we can buy, say, a burger for $1 from a fast food chain, or what it means when we're shopping and an egg carton says cage-free. And the reason we don't know this is because mainstream media underreports these stories. Just think about the last time that you saw on the news or online or on a TV show a real discussion about industrial animal agriculture, or even just about real images of our food systems. I think that we don't report on these facts because the impact of if we did report on the impact of industrial animal agriculture, we'd be presenting a very inconvenient dilemma. Either overhaul the current food system or continue to destroy the planet. So today we're just going to have a look at the role of the media in maintaining and in changing our food system. So this is a quote attributed to Philip Graham of the Washington Post. Whatever journalists commit to print and broadcast will be the primary information that future scholars will turn to analyze and to try to understand how we responded as a species to the most important issues of our time. For example, today, I believe that would be climate crisis. To briefly understand the relationship, this is just a little tiny bit of background, right? But to understand the relationship between the press, public opinion, and policy or behavioral change, we just need to take a very brief look at history. When the mainstream media actively covers social justice movements, the general public are made aware, governments are pressured to implement change, and that happens. And we can see that in everything from women's suffrage to civil rights. Public awareness is 100% a prerequisite to societal change. But there's another important factor that I want to take a look at as well here, which is what is the tone of the coverage? What is the frequency of the coverage? And does the way the media report have an influence on the outcome? So this is a book, I don't know if anyone has read it. I highly recommend it, whether you're based in the States or not. In Agendas and Instability in American Politics, there is a deep investigation in this book into press coverage. And it shows how whilst continued positive press, so continued positive stories, can strengthen institutional policies, negative press can actually dismantle them and encourage new ones to be implemented and created. So I'm going to take a look at a quick example. I know we're talking about chickens today, but we're going to start somewhere slightly different. But this is the biggest example, I think, of public behavior influencing public policy caused by press is the tobacco industry. So if you take a look at this graph on the left of the screen, you will see in black, so just the black line, that's the sales of tobacco. The brown line is the sales of tobacco. The positive articles covered is the green line, and the number of articles, just whether they're positive or negative, is the black line. So you can see in the pre-war period, so before the war, they were talking about tobacco 3 to 6 times a year in the press. But post-war, there was an uptick in positive stories, obviously buying tobacco, buying cigarettes. And there was a massive increase in sales. So again, that's the brown and the green line correlating. But then you can see after that, the number of positive articles started to decline. And as we see the positive articles decline, we see sales, the brown line, we see sales decline as well. So in the midst of this spike of negative articles, what became known as PR delay and confuse tactics was thrown out by the tobacco industry. For example, you can see in the top right, you have this New York Times article from 1964, which is trying to say that cancer doesn't exist, cancer isn't caused by smoking. And you can see, of course, we have Santa here selling cigarettes, an image that's like quite shocking to us today. But these delay and confuse tactics are when a party under attack sends out mixed messages or cast doubt and ultimately tries to slow down action in order to maximize sales. which is a great tactic because while people are confused and they don't know, does it cause cancer, does it not cause cancer, they're still going to buy your product because they're not sure. But then at that point, the health officials all mobilized and negative articles grew from an average of previously 2 a year in the 1950s to 41 during the 1960s. So in the case of smoking, increasing public awareness to the downside led to this dramatic change in public opinion. You can see in the press, this is in the 1970s, we have the New York Times now reporting that sales are declining, theaters are banning smoking, the number of hearings in talking about congressional agenda in the mid-70s grew and spiked as we had that transition. So today, when we buy cigarettes, they come with the Surgeon General's warning with lovely pictures of what smoking can do to us. But this is an important example of the correlation of sentiment of the press towards an issue, the frequency of the coverage, and the influence on public policy and therefore behavior. And we can see here, this is very clear, one article alone isn't enough to incite change on a behavioral, on an individual or policy level, but a whole host of articles over an extended period of time focusing on the negative impact might just have an effect. So why is this example of the tobacco industry relevant to the story of climate crisis and industrial animal agriculture? Well, tobacco once generated zero coverage in the media. Much like today, government actions were all almost entirely supportive of the agricultural subsidy program. So tobacco, like animal agriculture now, was seen as an important part of the economy, which supported millions of farmers, and sometimes entire state economies were completely dependent on tobacco. And that must ring true for you if you know anything about farming and industrial animal agriculture and how small farms are owned by the larger corporations right now. But tobacco was killing people and causing suffering and couldn't be allowed to do so. So whilst perhaps this media coverage wasn't necessarily intentionally out to take down big tobacco, it played, I think, a really pivotal role in the story of building a healthier society where smoking is now seen as widely undesirable. However, in part, due to those delay and confuse tactics I was talking about, it took around 20 years to have a real impact on the tobacco industry. So we can see here that by doing this delay and confuse, they're maximizing sales for another 20 years. We're going to see that play out in other industries too. So at Sentient Media, our mission, of course, is to accelerate a similar process for industrial animal agriculture, putting an end to the many issues from climate crisis to world hunger that could be fixed by our species switching to a plant-based diet. And then evoke the same feelings of kind of shock and disgust in future generations when they look at Santa feasting on a turkey, as we do today when we see him promoting cigarettes. But sticking with poultry, I want us to take a closer look at how the media has shaped our relationship with the chicken. We're still very much on this journey. The tobacco example is basically a kind of a closed circle, but when it comes to industrial animal agriculture, the book is still very open. So 10,000 years ago, the chicken was a rare bird found in South Asia, and we began to domesticate them. And now billions of chickens live on almost every continent and island, bar Antarctica. And the domesticated chicken is the most widespread bird on planet Earth. And if you measure success in terms of numbers, chickens are actually the most successful land animal ever. So 50 billion chickens are raised and slaughtered each year globally. And to put that in context, remember there's only 7 billion people on the planet right now. So how exactly did a bird who can't even fly become so popular and so present in our world? So I want to introduce you to Cecile Long-Steele. This is somebody who you could say is the accidental pioneer of the broiler industry. She's a housewife from Delaware in the USA. In the early 1900s in America, it was super common for families to order 50 eggs every spring to raise and eat the meat of the chickens and eat the eggs. Originally, eggs was the primary reason to have chickens. They didn't really eat the meat. And in 1923, Cecile put in her order, but due to a typo, instead of getting 50 eggs, she received 500 eggs. So instead of refusing these eggs, she decided to raise and sell the chickens. And she did this with such success that by 1926, she was raising over 10,000 chickens a year in what was termed the first broiler house. So a simple typo essentially meant that Cecile had to think fast and work out what kind of environment to build and how to keep the animals alive and how to organize 10,000 when she was previously used to 50. And at that point, chickens were really small. And like I said, they were really considered only for eggs. But of course, this broiler house model had spread around Delaware. Other corporations were already thinking about how they could capitalize on the country's hunger for meat. And this is where the press came in, obviously, with their positive stories. So soon the idea of poultry was synonymous with a way forward for farmers, industry, and the country. And chicken meat became this symbol of prosperity and became an integral part of the American zeitgeist. So the idea of making profit took over, press were excited. We have stories like this, a chicken for every pot, which you might have heard the phrase. This was used by Herbert Hoover's successful 1928 presidential campaign. This phrase underpinned it, just showing how fundamental chicken farmers and the chicken meat and eggs were to the idea of success and American identity, and just how ingrained it is. So shortly after, so that was 1928, shortly after in 1933, we saw the introduction of the agricultural subsidy programs like those for the tobacco industry, and they played a huge role in shaping the global system of today. It's a good tip to always follow the money. So today, when you look at the chicken or poultry industry, it's obviously massive money, and it essentially boils down into 6 key players. These are the 6 organizations who are like the invisible force behind the chicken that we consume today and the way our food system currently operates. And the poultry industry operates in a very different way from the dairy industry. They own, it's called vertical integration. They own every single aspect of production. So they own the hatcheries, the feed mills, the slaughterhouses, the trucking lines. They determine the welfare rules. These 6 organizations are responsible for the welfare and the life of the 50 billion chickens that I mentioned earlier. The only thing they don't own is the chicken waste and the land that the chickens stand on. So the farmer's job today is essentially to babysit the animals, making sure the heating works. And of course, it's worth a lot of money to those 6 groups. So the poultry market was valued at $310.7 billion in 2020, estimated to grow by 3.8% in 2021. And when you think about how few groups profit from that figure, you begin to get a picture of how feeding humans is essentially a byproduct of an incredibly profitable industry. It's not an industry that's built to sustain life, human or otherwise. But in spite of all of that corner cutting and overcrowding and cheap feed, etc., they can't function without the government subsidies I was talking about. In fact, for the total industrial animal agriculture, this isn't just poultry, this is all of it, they receive about $1 million in subsidies every single minute. So since we've met today, that's $26 million in government subsidies globally that have been distributed to fund industrial animal agriculture. So fast forward to today, still we have Craig Watts. So this is a farmer who features in Leah Garcis's book, Grilled. Craig is essentially today's equivalent of Cecile. So he is a small farmer turning to chicken farming to make a living, but he's a victim of this new vertical integration that's turned the industry into this brutal space. So in 1992, he entered the poultry industry, and with a loan guaranteed by Purdue, who's one of those 6 groups, set up these 4 broiler houses. And in the poultry world, you only get paid when you hit your targets. And if you miss them, your pay is deducted and given to those who hit theirs. So it essentially creates competition with neighbors. Of course, all the while you're in debt to the business who own the chickens, and you very rarely see any profit. So unlike Cecile Steele, who kept all her profits, owned the eggs, owned the chickens, responsible for the welfare, this is all for Craig. This is all the property of the corporation, not himself. So eventually Craig became really disillusioned. He opened his doors to animal protection charities, and they helped him document the reality of what it looks like when you outsource welfare to a corporation. He was named Whistleblower of the Year. But regardless of where you are in the world, the chicken and eggs you're consuming are pretty much all guaranteed to be from factory farms like Craig's. So it's estimated that 99.9% of all chickens and eggs consumed today come from these animal factories or concentrated animal feedlots, CAFOs, which is quite extreme. In fact, environmentally speaking today, about 70% of the globe's vegetated land is dedicated to agriculture, and about 30% of cropland is used to grow grain for animal feed. So given how much land it takes to grow food to feed farmed animals, meat production is now the leading cause of deforestation across our planet. And data analysis points to the figure of 37% of greenhouse gas emissions being caused by industrial animal agriculture. And I recommend you look at plantbaseddata.org to dig into that figure, because it's quite a compelling argument. Despite the numbers in which they suffer, as we've spoken about, 50 billion, when we look to the media, cows get the blame for climate crisis, and chickens are seen as healthy and sustainable alternative. This is something we were talking about at the beginning of this call, why do we always point to chickens and fishes as the alternative? And it's endemic, it's everywhere. But when you take a closer look, you can see that actually these calculations about which animal meat is better for, for the environment rarely take into consideration where the feed is coming from. It's exactly the same as with farmed fishes. People think it's a safe, environmentally friendly way to eat fishes, but they neglect to acknowledge that essentially all of the feed for farmed fish comes from the high seas, from trawlers. It endorses sea slavery and the worst kind of destruction to our oceans imaginable. But because they come from a pot, close to the ocean, people think, oh, well, that close to the ocean shore, they think, oh, well, that's going to be a safer way to eat fish. But with chickens, you can see here that they make up a majority of the consumption of the world's soy, responsible for this deforestation and the devastation of our planet, as I was just saying. So with all of this in mind, with us all being aware of everything we've spoken about here, about the tobacco example, and how the uptick in negative press really helps us get to where we are today, you'd have thought that climate change, climate crisis, and industrial animal agriculture was all the media would be talking about, right? Well, you would be wrong, because what we actually talk about is cake. So this is a true story. This is a report that came out last week. By the way, this is a vegan cake. But a couple of weeks ago, there was an analysis of UK television. We talk more about dogs, cake, and birds than we do about climate change. But okay, so everything we know about climate change and everything we know about the role of industrial animal agriculture in climate change, you'd think, for that small period of time when we are talking about it, industrial animal agriculture would be front and center as something we have to address to mitigate climate change. But again, you would be wrong. So Sentient Media did some analysis in 2019 of Covering Climate Now coverage, which basically is a large group of over 460 publications, from The Guardian to Al Jazeera, coming together to report on climate crisis. In that year, in 2019, the impact of aviation on the environment was reported on 120 times more than the impact of industrial animal agriculture. And let's consider that aviation only accounts for up to 5% compared to the 37% we spoke about earlier of greenhouse gas emissions. And when they came up with that 5%, I don't know if they actually included the meals, the carbon footprint of the meals served on board, but that's for a different day. So we've looked at industrial animal agriculture through the lens of chicken farming. We've looked at the environment. And I just want to quickly take a step back and look at the patterns in reporting throughout history to help us understand where we are today and what we can do about it. So starting with climate change, you might not know this, or you might already know this. I wasn't aware when I first read about this, but when we first started reporting on climate change in the 1960s, the papers reported that it was a serious crisis and that they were positive that we would set in long-term policies and that we'd be able to mitigate it in the future. So actually, when we first started talking about climate crisis, it was very much, yes, this is happening, and yes, we need to do something about it. But I would expect that from your own personal experience, you will know that the debate about climate change in the last third of the 20th century is actually characterized by these delay and confuse tactics, right? So to fight back from fossil fuel industries who have had all the money to apply these tactics. I'm sure the people who have been looking at the media in the last, before 2000 will see that actually the stories we're reading are about whether climate change actually exists and whether it's actually happening. So I've made a very kind of basic timeline to help kind of set the scene here. So in the 1960s and 70s, we started reporting on the problems with climate change. But by 1977, Exxon began to worry and set up this credible, they're calling it credible R&D lab, to examine examine CO2 emissions. And by the 80s, they put aside, hundreds of thousands of dollars to establish groups with credible sounding names to take down, to spread skepticism. So some of the names are the Global Climate Coalition, the Global Climate Information Project, things like that to tout skepticism about climate crisis. And this is the classic PR delay tactics which dominated media coverage from the 80s to the 2000s until the Merchants of Doubt came out in 2010, exposing how a handful of scientists obscured truth on the issues from tobacco smoke to global warming. And we can see now today that organizations, Exxon, Shell, et cetera, are all touting these stories. They're now greenwashing. They're saying, oh yes, we know there's a problem and we're fixing it. It's going to be fine. But at least they're acknowledging that there is a problem. But like the tobacco industry, the oil industry has used the same playbook, and they've managed to delay any kind of response to climate crisis for, according to my timeline, about 30 years, which is really disappointing. And now big ag, industrial animal agriculture is doing the same thing. So campaigns run by Animal Agriculture Alliance and Danish Crown are just two examples in this fantastic investigation by DSMOG, by the way in which meat industry is increasingly turning to a playbook long used by other polluting sectors such as big oil and pesticide and manufacturers, with campaigns ultimately causing, again, this confusion and delay tactic. So here we have the chicken example. So around the 1920s, when we saw Cecile and we saw the rise, the growth of those organizations like Tyson and Pilgrims, and we saw the dedication to vertical integration, the chicken in every pot slogan summed up the sentiment. And all of the biggest players in poultry industry today took over, and we saw rapid growth and lots of positive press. There was a Chicken of Tomorrow campaign, which I don't have time to go into today, but it essentially looked at how to improve chickens and make them, bigger on less feed, essentially. This is some, positive propaganda sent out by the chicken industry, showing how happy they are at how quickly they can raise a chicken to be killed at only 8 weeks old. This is what the bird actually looks like in real life. And as a side note, they grow the bird so quickly that it's the equivalent of if a baby would weigh 300 kilos or 47 stone at just 2 months old. As you can see, the birds are not standing up. I don't think a baby of that weight would stand up either. But we don't see any notable backlash against the chicken industry until the early 2000s, when undercover investigations by groups like PETA led to these small policy changes in California. And in 2012, the EU banned battery cages. And then there was more coverage about the unsustainable cruelty of the meat and dairy industry, with lots of documentaries exposing things. And now we have, what we have now is the industry leaders, this is across all industrial animal agriculture, coming together in this designing this unified PR push. This graph depicts the messaging and the language and the techniques used by the key players in industrial agriculture to present the story that animal agriculture isn't a serious driver of climate change, despite all of the things that we know. So like Exxon setting up dedicated groups to disperse climate change skepticism, the meat industry is doing the same thing with the message that industrial animal agriculture isn't a driver of climate change. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, this is very recent, the National Chicken Council, who of course want us to keep eating chickens, are producing a brazen greenwashing report. It's their first ever report on chicken farming and sustainability. And I'll let you guess what their conclusion is. So my question is, are we at the start of the delay and confused tactics when it comes to the impact of industrial agriculture on climate change? Are we at that point, from before that the Exxon companies, that the oil companies were at? I don't know the answer, but I feel like we're reaching a tipping point. There's a long way to go, but I think we're getting closer. There's a lot of desperate measures being taken by the meat and dairy industries right now, but COVID-19 definitely exposed some of the worst practices and dangers associated with industrial ag, and of course, the health benefits that come with eating a plant-based diet. So I'll leave you with this. You know, we've gone through a lot, so it's a lot for you to digest, but essentially food is everything, right? It's essential for life on Earth. But now by allowing these industries to dictate what we eat, to dictate what's covered in the press, by allowing control to fall into the hands of the few, the food that is essential for life is actually destroying it, all of it on Earth. And the future of life on Earth and the planet itself will be decided by the choices that we all make today. And as we've now learned, the more we tell these stories in the press and mainstream media, the more likely we are to influence policy and change the way people consume in order to protect the future of our own species and all of the beings that we share the planet with. So if you're interested in learning about how to write, or you want to explore more about the role of industrial animal agriculture in climate change, at Sentient Media, we have a writers collective, which is free, funded by animal charity evaluators. You're all welcome to submit an application and join, and we'll share what we've all been working on and help you learn how to use the power of the word to help reveal the truth about industrial animal agriculture. So yes, thank you very much. And I invite any questions.
Wow, thank you. Oh my God. I mean, this is I have watched and heard many talks about animals, animal agriculture, environment, but really I've never really heard anybody talk about exactly why the mainstream media is so silent about the elephant in the room. Why nobody talks about it? And although I have faced it, I mean, me being a speaker myself, and anybody who is a speaker, I'm sure Andrea also has faced it. Whenever I have given talks about how our foods are interconnected with the well-being of the planet, like directly connected to the well-being of the planet, I have many times I have faced this question about why are you the first, if this problem is so grave, then why didn't we hear it before we met you? And I really didn't know. I really don't know. And I would just say that, I don't know that why you didn't hear it, but this information is there everywhere. Thank you so much, Anna, for this wonderful and absolutely unique angle about animal agriculture and the way the media dictates upon our decisions. So I'll just open it up to everybody else if you have any question. I see some comments. Is there anybody who wants to ask a question to Anna?
Well, I would love to jump in just for a minute. Anna, that was phenomenal. Oh my gosh.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Incredible. I'm so excited that you have this presentation together. I'm so excited for you to give it more to more people, and we're going to share it as widely as we possibly can. I have a question for you, a little bit, maybe a little bit off topic, but you may not know about this, so don't feel badly if you don't. But I told you that we have gotten to know the Plant-Based Treaty folks. And actually, I don't think this is really part of the Plant-Based Treaty, but some of the work that they are doing I can't remember the name of the organization they come from right now, but they also have a campaign to start to expose this, what's it called? The chicken gifting, animal gifting. Have you heard about that?
No.
No.
At least I haven't.
Oh, okay.
No.
That's okay. Yeah, there are these large organizations, and of course the names are escaping me right now, who are going to developing nations in places like India, and they're trying to promote backyard chickens and things like that. So they're actually promoting more and more and more consumption and raising of animals. And
yeah, there is a massive push right now, I think, that coincided in particular with the recent UN Food Systems Summit about promoting backyard farming and having that as the solution. To which, to me, the answer is obvious. Like if we look at the number of chickens or the number of industrial farmed animals, globally, we're talking 72 billion land animals. How are we going to grow them in our gardens? and how is that actually going to feed the world? How is it actually going to, as we grow as a population? It's not actually possible. The other argument being regenerative agriculture, which we're seeing a lot about right now, which again, the same answer is there for me. We'll be able to feed a very small percentage of our population, which is what we're doing right now anyway, with simultaneous pandemics of obesity and starvation eating at our planet. So yeah, it's a concerning trend, and I think that that's a really important narrative to help shift, and we're aware of it, and you all are aware of it, and I think that our job is to make sure that we present the facts around this.
Thank you. But I have a question specific now to your presentation. So how is it, how do you guys are doing such amazing work? How is it that more of your work, more of your findings can get into the mainstream media? What strategies do you guys have to get that happening?
Yeah, so we have our writers collective where, our belief is that if we can train and empower the next generation of journalists, we're going to be creating a better media landscape. So we have our writers collective where we currently have about 300 people who are training on free online training programs, advocate to journalist or environment and animal reporting, all of these things. And we have mentors, like Jeff Sebo, Christopher Sebastian, lots of really popular people in this space who are there to help train people how to write and how to pitch and how to get stories out into the press. So that's one of our major goals, is making sure that we're there to train people. And we believe that if we can, we have this global network, right? So we have people all over the world in, 30 plus countries, the last time I looked. So we're trying to encourage people to pitch local, to tell the stories local to them and get them into local media. And then when it's possible, to elevate it to a national story or an international story. But yeah, that's one of our key tactics. Our other one is acting as a resource for writers and journalists. So essentially, when anybody has a question, they go to Google, right? So notoriously, the meat and dairy industry and other organizations spend a lot of money on digital marketing. And it's not a skill that we have in the animal, particularly speaking about nonprofit animal protection spaces. So for us, as a journalism nonprofit with a lot of tech kind of DNA in our founding, in our founders, we believe that the power of being there on the first page of Google is something, that's actually led us. Our articles have been quoted all over the place because when a journalist is Googling for something, they get the answer, but it's a pro-animal or a pro-animal life or a pro-environment message, which is underpinning the story that we're presenting. So we work with about 6 other groups within animal protection right now to help them create content that appears on the first page of Google. I think as it stands right now, our content accounts for the first 3 slots in Google for over 1,300 terms related to diet and animal exploitation. So that's one of our other tactics, like being there as a resource. If that made sense.
It made sense, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Amber.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, of course. I have a question. Like for example, for cows, like cows are used for beef, and I mean, they are bred for beef as well as dairy. Similarly, we have chickens, and chickens are bred for their flesh and eggs. So I'm wondering whether there is any difference in the kind of footprints these two industries, which is the chicken meat and the egg laying chicken industry, whether they are different in their footprints, and which part about which aspect of the environment gets the maximum impact from these two industries.
That is a fantastic question, which I definitely am not qualified to answer. I think for me, if we talk about waste, the dairy industry is huge.
Yeah.
Not only are you wasting lives, but the milk, the gallons and gallons of milk that are wasted every day. But I would encourage everybody, I'll put a link in now to plant-based data, where Nicholas Carter and his group have delved deep into the stats and reports on all of these types of topics, and that would be a much better answer than what I can give, because they really show how they come up with the figures, like what they're taking into account. Because one of the things that we do know is, the 14.5% that's kind of touted around, or was by the UN, it doesn't even take into account feed. Like how can you look just at an individual animal without considering what they eat and the impact that has? But yeah, I also just wanted to say, I just put another article just landed this morning. I didn't get time to work it into my talk, but it's about the greenwashing of the oil industries, again, about climate change. So even though we feel like we're kind of over that hurdle, just a reminder, we're not. They're still green. They're now doing the next phase, which is greenwashing their activities to make it look like they're mitigating climate change, exactly like industrial agriculture. But yeah, did somebody have a hand raised? Oh.
Yeah, it is I. So thank you so much, Anna, and I really appreciated the history lessons. In a way, it's history repeats itself in the in regards to the messaging in the media. I grew up in a time period where smoking was quite normalized, and of course, then there was seat belts is a kind of another connecting story. But so being an environmentally interested person, this isn't so much a question, but a comment, and I really appreciate your historical treatise there. In 1979, the global climate change messaging is very interesting, because I wrote a paper in 1979. It was just a paper for a class in college, environmental chemistry, on global warming. And it was based on a Scientific American article. And it was basically just tracing CO2 levels from pre-industrial levels. And so that captivated my interest in 1979. And then, of course, the whole thing kind of went quiet until Al Gore came out with his Inconvenient Truth and so forth. So that's very interesting. Another interesting thing in Rotary is we had a Rotary talk about Kentucky Fried Chicken in China, and it was portrayed as this glowing success story of this commercial enterprise that had entered the Chinese market. And of course, I was already a vegan at this point, and I was just sitting there thinking the whole time, boy, are the chickens in trouble over there in China, with this energy industry promulgating. And it was announced as this great, commercialized success story. I don't know, America's taking over China or something like that. But anyway, those are just a couple of points along the way. And I just really am so happy to have had your presentation put on our Rotary recording here.
That's really, thank you very much. And thanks for your kind words. But that is super interesting. And it is 2 points that could be added to, to my timeline there. I'm curious, when you did your report in 79, did you get the sense that Exxon were fighting against climate change already, or was it still kind of quiet?
Yeah, I didn't have a sense kind of either way on that, because my awareness of, actually connecting the smoking story and the trajectory on that is really quite key in kind of all of these things, all public health issues. So, yeah, I mean, that whole thing was, resolving. I had family members that kept smoking beyond that, and and ultimately quit, So it's a very interesting story at all different levels, personally, and then, the messaging out there. So good question.
100%. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Manish?
We have a question from Manish.
Yeah, if there's a moment. Thank you very
Sure.
much. First of all, Anna, I want to really compliment you on the wonderful presentation. I had no idea about these insights about the origins of the broiler chicken industry in America. And of course, as you rightly pointed out, one of the Purdue family, which is the Purdue brand as well, out of Georgia, has pretty much dominated this thing for I don't know how long. And I know there's other companies, Pilgrim's Pride and all. My question was, have you looked at documenting the cost of all the culling that has occurred over every couple of years? There's a new flavor of bird flu coming out, right? And then and the masses, all these farms go out on a massive killing spree for all these chickens. They bury them, they burn them, I don't know what else, unspeakable things they do to them on top of it. And by the way, I follow the Jain faith. We are very strict vegetarian, but also, it just pains me to see this complete loss of life of every form, So I just want to ask you, does your company track the environmental, social, and I guess other costs related to the culling industry and the culling of these chickens and other animals? Look at pigs in China. They had this swine flu going on. My goodness, millions of pigs got culled a few years ago. And the mad cow disease, right, in the UK. So I didn't want to leave the UK out.
No, well, the UK right now is doing it with pigs because of Brexit. So they don't have, it's a long story, but yeah, we have a situation going on in the UK where everybody's saying we're going to have to cull healthy pigs. You're like, well, you're gonna kill them anyway. So what are you all upset about? But yeah, so it's a really good point, and absolutely we cover all aspects of this, and particularly during the COVID-19 pandemic when there were mass cullings, or what they term their term is depopulation. And they did this there's actually an interesting story in Iowa, in a state in America. There was a farm that had to depopulate the pigs, and they did it in such appalling ways that I've spoken to people in animal rights who are like, I've never, been working in this space for over 50 years and never seen anything this bad. And undercover activists actually got in and got footage and exposed it. And then what happened after that was Iowa passed another ag-gag bill, another ag-gag law. And an ag-gag law is something which obviously stops people from being able to report and tell these stories. So we have this problem as well. It's a really interesting point that you raise, like the relationship between, undercover investigations, the media, and policy. Like, if our gag bills are being passed all the time, like how are we going to tell these stories? So for our organization, what we try to do is, yes, we need to report on all of the stories, obviously, but we also need to try and think strategically. Like, we can look at states, like there was an instance in California where they had gill nets, these fishing nets off the coast, which were catching, what you would call cute animals, like dolphins and turtles and things like that. And California was already getting close to banning these gill nets. So an undercover investigator that we know went and got footage, and then it went into the media, and then straight away, almost straight away, California outlawed gill nets, and that's an example of when the media, the undercover investigator, and the state was already ready with the policy lined up. But in Iowa, last year, I think it was last year, yes, it must have been last year because it was COVID. In Iowa last year, Iowa had already passed our gag laws. So they were already ready to pass an gag law as a response to something like this being exposed. So yeah, it's a super interesting kind of balance. Yeah, it's how do we balance these things? How do we think strategically about them? And yeah, our verticals on our website, we talk about big ag, COVID, culture, environment, and justice. So your element there, talking about pandemics, about culls, about other zoonotic diseases, we absolutely cover those stories. Yeah.
So may I ask you, if you don't mind, a follow-up question? Are you involved at all with the COP26 conference in any manner, between organizing gatherings of like-minded organizations like yours and ours or just public activism?
In terms of coverage, you mean?
Yes, in terms of coverage.
Yes.
And
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
So
yeah.
again, to raise the voice for this whole issue of animal-based agriculture.
Absolutely, that's our mission. And if we can accelerate it so that the years are shorter between this kind of greenwashing and work, then that's our mission. We want to make it so that images of Santa with turkey are not looked upon happily as quickly as possible.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Quick question for you. I saw in one of your slides an article about an ag gag short film. Is that your short film? A short film highlights the dangers of ag gag, or was that just you guys reporting on that?
I think that was a report. Yeah. So
okay.
Which one is that? Oh, or was it the one from it might have been the one from The Intercept. But would you like me to put something in the chat here about our ag gag coverage?
That would be great. Yeah,
I think
would really
this is
that.
the one. This might be the one that you're talking about.
Yeah.
From the Animal Legal Defense. Is that the one that you're talking about?
Oh, yes, that's it. Thank you.
Cool.
Yeah, thank you for that. I appreciate it. And I just I'd love to go back just very quickly to the point you made earlier about how the meat and dairy and industry is putting so much money into advertising on the internet, because I have noticed more and more that when I'm searching on something, often the ad that will be, like if I'm looking in YouTube, the ad that plays is about how delicious steaks are and, all kinds of meat advertisements. It's really so insidious. It's really upsetting to me. And when you say that you guys are working very hard on, becoming the first or second or third result that Google is delivering, is that a question of just paying more, or is it more content or getting more views?
Yeah, so two interesting points. I'll be brief for you all. So obviously social media and Google use algorithms to track who you are. They use cookies, etc., to track who you are, and then they send you content they think you'd like. So the adverts that you're seeing that are meat orientated, that's interesting. So perhaps you're using incognito windows or something correctly, or somebody's using your computer to Google meat a lot, or they're just wrong in their analysis of you. But yeah, so that is interesting, and it is something. It's normally the opposite. It's normally that vegans or plant-based people just see vegan content, so they think, oh, the world's changing, yay, everything's vegan now. Whereas in reality, actually, meat consumption and dairy consumption are rising on a global trajectory. So that's an interesting dilemma that you've got. But in terms of ranking in Google, we actually have a course in our Writers Collective, which is, I'll send a link to our Writers Collective page, so anybody who's interested can put in an application. We have a course in there that goes into detail about what it is that you've got to do. But it's certainly not about paying more. We're talking about organic work. So you can do Google ads. We do that. We offer this service within the movement. So you can have like a Google ad grant management. Google gives $10,000 in ad money a month to nonprofits. So it's like free money basically. So we can help manage that. But in terms of creating content that ranks in Google, it's, the most important thing is like consistency, being aware of what people are searching for, and length. You need to create long articles. So I can send you an article now that's like one of our, what you might call an explainer piece. So let's have a look. So I can send you a piece in the chat here that's like a explainer article, which is of the length that we would recommend for this kind of content. But it's not a simple thing, but there is a course called Writing to Rank in our Writers Collective, which we recommend you all to take. I'm just trying to find our latest.
Oh, that's great. Okay, that's a really great clarification. I know nothing about this space, but would love to learn more. Thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And if anybody is working for an organization that could benefit from being more visible in Google, then like I say, we do offer it as a service. So you can all contact me and let me know if you're interested in hearing more about what we've been up to. So that article I just sent is oh, sorry.
Dairy farming.
Yeah, so that's an example of one of these long form pieces designed to rank in Google, and that's taking the keyword dairy farming. And here's a little bit more about our services.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So may I ask
Do
one more question,
yeah.
if you don't mind? For Sentient Media, what is your outreach to the youth? I think that's the only hope. As you said earlier on, education and awareness is the only way to start a new generation of writers who can, see these terrible things going on in the world and really speak up, as many are already exempling. So can you speak to that, please, if you have a moment? Otherwise, that's okay.
I do, yeah, I have a moment. Thank you. It's a great question. We have two things that we're doing. One is the Sentient Media Social Media Fellowship, which is funded by Veg Fund. And that's all about training people. We've just actually closed it. We've just finished it. We finished a long run of working with over 100 people across the globe, a younger demographic, helping train them in social media and how to create fact-based kind of advocacy. So how to tell the story and how to communicate in a way that isn't antagonistic, that's open, that's friendly, and that is based and rooted in journalistic integrity. So we've just actually finished, we've just sent out our last newsletter, which you might be interested in because it contains, we had 100 people over 100 in, was it 12 locations? And then we ended up doing food giveaways with $1 Million Vegan, and yeah, it's been a really, really cool experience. So I'll just try and find.
If you can send me a link to that, I'd really appreciate it. I'll get it out to our youth.
Yeah, let me grab that. And then the other thing that we've got is the I'll just send you a link to the final newsletter, which kind of sums up everything that's happened. And then the other thing that we've got is the Sentient Media Journalism Fund. Timmy and John Sobrato and Stray Dog Institute have awarded $10,000 for us to support journalists underrepresented in animal rights or journalism. So we're going out, we're targeting people in colleges and the younger generations in order to give them a small amount of like a stipend, a small amount of financial support for them to go through the training and to actually produce content and pitch it out and give them mentorship and help them get their voices heard. Because we think, the youth is incredibly important, but it's also incredibly important to change the existing voices that we're hearing. And it's predominantly Western, obviously, it's like we need to hear from everybody across the globe. And that is front and center of the work that we do at Sentient Media.
Excellent.
So, yeah, thanks for your question.
Yeah, I think I'll just add to what Anna just said, that whether it is within the Rotary world or outside of Rotary, there's always a attraction to bring the youth on board whenever there is any work that needs to be done. I also believe that, yes, because I believe the youth should come on board for climate change because they are the ones who will be facing it in the next 40 years or probably earlier. But I feel that the generations who might not be facing it, who might be gone from the planet before climate catastrophe really strikes, I don't think that they should exclude themselves from the solution, from being the solution, or from acting to get the solution out in the open. So I just I've always faced this feedback about how to engage the youth, and the youth is the future, youth is going to do everything, and we are not going to do anything. so I just feel that some kind of something to motivate everyone, which is like universal throughout all age groups, is very important. Because honestly, the problem has not been created by the youth. They didn't create it. Those of the older generations are the ones who actually created it. So we should be a part of the solution, and I feel a way to motivate them would be fantastic. And I want to congratulate you, Anna, for the fantastic work that you are doing, Sentient Media. And I am so happy that I reached out to you and requested you to come and give a talk. I'm absolutely delighted right now, and we are going to share this amongst all our friends. I just want to acknowledge Rotarian Nag Jyoti from District 3170. she joined us in the middle of the talk. I hope she. Oh, yeah, yeah. So I hope now is
Thank
okay.
you. Thank you for wonderful
Yeah.
session.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
And
Thank you so much
I have
for the.
taken the recording from the chat. Thanks a lot, and I will share with the ISRAG. I am a ISRAG member, South Asia.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. You can also actually pass on our challenge sign up link, which I sent already.
Okay.
That people, anybody can sign up. Anybody. I know that in India, I am from India myself, and I know Indians have a lot of there are a lot of vegetarians, but probably the kind of the gravity of the problem is so high right now that probably not even we need to go a little bit beyond being vegetarian as well.
Yeah.
So it would be really helpful if you pass on the link
Yes.
to the SRAG members
Yes.
there or your club.
I will pass on, but if possible, then on my email ID also, if something is there, keep me in loop, and then
Sure,
accordingly I will.
sure. Can
Yeah.
I get your email ID so that I can write to you?
Yes, yes. I have added in the chat just before.
Oh, there it is. I also wanted to let you know that I sent you the link where recordings of all of the presentations will be.
Thank you for wonderful session.
Anna's presentation will be there within the next several hours. We just have to wait until it downloads, and then we'll put it in there. And then I put the registration link for the challenge in there as well. Great. Anna, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm
Thank
so
you
glad
so
that,
much,
I'm so glad you
Mohan.
enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thanks, everyone.
Tino. Thank you, Manish and Sylvester.
Thank you
and
guys for
Tekshi,
organizing as always.
And Nagjyoti and Betty. Thank you so much. And I hope to see you guys for our next event, which is happening tomorrow.
Oh,
When?
yes, tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern. And by the way, Anna, you'll love this. Tushar Mehta is our next presenter. He's the co-founder of Plant-Based Data with Nicholas Carter. Yeah.
You know Tushar?
Great. Yeah, he's great.
So
Yeah,
everyone,
we'll have a nice time.
Please join tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern, which is actually Wednesday morning, 8 a.m. Singapore time.
In Asia, yeah. And
Tushar and
too
Nicholas
early.
are in our Writers Collective as well, building out
Yes,
part
yes,
of the
that's
learning
right.
resources.
Tushar often quotes from Nick Carter. You're right.
Great.
Yeah.
Great, Anna. That's
Very
so good to
cool.
know. Okay, wonderful.
Awesome.
We'll be in
Thank you all
touch,
for
Anna.
organizing.
We hope we can be in touch
Thank
with you
you.
too with maybe some
Please.
ideas. Yeah.
Absolutely.
you. Thank you
Anytime,
so much.
anytime.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank
Speak
you,
to you
everybody.
soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
All the best,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Have a great day.
Andrea, just
Bye.
stay back, Andrea. Just go.
Bye.
I'll
Bye-bye.
just stop the recording.
Bye.